You know those weekends when all you want to do is chill at home, maybe play some video games, and forget about the world? That was exactly my plan last Saturday. I had a rough week at work, deadlines piling up, my boss breathing down my neck, the usual. So, I thought, why not spend the whole day gaming? It seemed like the perfect way to unwind. I grabbed some snacks, chips, soda, the works, and settled into my chair. I was really into this new horror game that had just come out. I'm usually not one for scary stuff, but this one had great reviews, and I was feeling adventurous. Plus, it was broad daylight. What could go wrong, right? I loaded up the game and put on my headset, cranking up the volume to get the full experience. It started off like any other horror game. Dark, creepy atmosphere, eerie music, the whole 9 yards. I was moving through these abandoned hallways, searching for clues, avoiding traps. It was intense, but nothing I couldn't handle. About an hour in, I noticed something strange. There was this background noise, like a faint scratching sound. At first I thought it was just part of the game's ambiance, to make it more spooky. But it started getting louder, like it was coming from inside my room. I paused the game and took off my headset, listening intently. Nothing, just the usual sounds of my apartment building. Neighbors talking, someone walking down the hallway outside. I shrugged it off and went back to playing. But then it happened again, this time louder. It was like something was scraping against the wall behind my desk. I froze, staring at the wall in front of me, my heart pounding. I slowly turned around, half expecting to see something, but the room was empty. Just my cluttered desk, a pile of laundry in the corner, and the curtains slightly swaying from the breeze outside. I took a deep breath, telling myself it was just my imagination. Maybe I was getting too into the game, letting it mess with my head. I put my headset back on and continued playing, but I couldn't shake off the uneasy feeling. Every creak and groan of the building seemed amplified, like the whole place was alive and watching me. I tried to focus on the game, but the atmosphere was getting to me. I was creeping through this abandoned hospital, every door creaking open, shadows moving at the edge of my vision. My character walked into this room, and suddenly, the screen glitched. It wasn't the kind of glitch where the game lags or the graphics mess up. It was like the screen itself was tearing apart, pixels scattering everywhere. Then, for just a split second, I thought I saw something on the screen that didn't belong there. It looked like a face, distorted and stretched out, just for a second before it vanished. I paused the game, my hands shaking. What the hell was that? I replayed that part, but it was gone. No glitch, no weird face, nothing. I was starting to feel really uneasy, but I told myself it was just the game, some kind of hidden Easter egg or something to mess with the player. These horror games love doing that kind of thing. I took a break, walked around the apartment, grabbed a drink. I kept telling myself I was being paranoid, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I went back to my desk and sat down, determined to finish the game. The next level was even creepier. My character was walking through this maze of tunnels, the walls covered in what looked like old, decaying wallpaper. The scratching sound was back, louder than ever, like it was right next to my ear. I was about to take off my headset again when the lights in my room flickered. I froze. My heart was racing. This wasn't part of the game. The lights flickered again, and then the room went dark. My screen was the only source of light, casting this eerie glow around the room. I took off my headset, and that's when I heard it. There was a noise coming from the hallway outside my apartment. It sounded like footsteps, slow and deliberate, like someone was creeping around out there. I got up and went to the door, pressing my ear against it. The footsteps stopped. I held my breath, waiting, listening. Nothing. Just silence. I opened the door crack and peeked out into the hallway. It was empty, just a dimly lit corridor stretching out in both directions. I stepped out, looking around, but there was no one there. I was about to go back inside when I heard a faint whisper. I couldn't make out what it was saying, but it sent chills down my spine. I quickly shut the door and locked it, my heart pounding in my chest. What the hell was going on? I went back to my desk and sat down, staring at the game screen. My character was still standing in that tunnel, the scratching sound echoing through my headset. I didn't want to keep playing, but I felt this weird urge to see what would happen next. I moved forward, and the tunnel opened up into this large, dark room. In the center of the room was a chair, and sitting in the chair was a figure, slumped over like it was asleep. I approached it slowly, my finger hovering over the pause button, ready to stop the game if something jumped out at me. As I got closer, the figure started to move. It slowly lifted its head, and I felt my breath catch in my throat. It was the same face I had seen in the glitch earlier, distorted and stretched, but now it was staring right at me, its eyes black and hollow. I tried to pause the game, but the controls weren't responding. The screen started to glitch again, the pixels tearing apart, and that's when I heard the footsteps behind me. Not in the game, in my room. I whipped around, but there was no one there. Just the empty room, the shadows dancing on the walls from the flickering screen. I turned back to the game, and the figure was gone. The room was empty. The chair was empty. I was shaking now, my hands clammy and cold. I reached for the power button on my computer, ready to shut the whole thing down, when the lights in the room suddenly came back on. I sat there, staring at the screen, my finger hovering over the button. I didn't know what to do. It felt like I was trapped, like something was messing with me, trying to keep me playing. I finally mustered up the courage to hit the power button, and the screen went black. I ripped off my headset and pushed my chair back, getting as far away from the computer as I could. I stood there, breathing heavily, trying to calm down. The room was dead silent now. No more footsteps, no more scratching, just the hum of my computer as it powered down. I didn't touch my computer for the rest of the day. I couldn't. I just sat on the couch, staring at the screen, waiting for something else to happen, but nothing did. The rest of the day was quiet, almost too quiet. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that face, those hollow eyes staring at me. I kept hearing noises too, like faint whispers coming from the walls. I tried to tell myself it was just the game messing with my head, but it felt so real. The next morning, I decided to uninstall the game. I didn't want to deal with it anymore, but when I turned on my computer, something was wrong. The screen was frozen on the game's main menu. The figure from the game now front and center, staring directly at me. I tried to force quit, but nothing happened. The screen just stayed there, that face watching me, unblinking. My heart was pounding. I reached for the power button, but my hand froze. I couldn't move. It was like something was holding me in place, making me watch. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the screen went black. The computer powered down on its own, the room going dark and silent. I sat there, my mind racing, trying to process what had just happened. I haven't touched that game since. In fact, I haven't really played any games since then. I can't. Every time I think about sitting down at my computer, I get this sick feeling in my stomach, like something is watching me, waiting for me to come back. It's been a few weeks now, and I still can't shake the feeling that whatever it was, it's still here, lurking in the shadows of my apartment. I hear things at night, whispers and footsteps, but when I get up to check, there's never anything there. I don't know what it was, or if it was even real. Maybe I just let the game get to me, let my imagination run wild. But every now and then, when I'm sitting alone in my room, I feel it, that presence, that cold, creeping fear. And I know it's just waiting for me to turn on the game again, to pick up where I left off. Alright, so this one night, I was home alone, just doing my usual gaming session. You know how it is. When you finally have the house to yourself, you can really get into the zone without any interruptions. I've been playing this new horror game that just came out. Everyone online was talking about how intense it was. So I thought, why not give it a shot? I mean, I've played plenty of horror games before, and they don't usually get to me. But this one had a different vibe from the start. The game was all about exploring this creepy, abandoned hospital, full of dark hallways and strange noises, the kind that makes you constantly look over your shoulder, even though you know there's nothing there. The graphics were super realistic, and the sound design was crazy good. Every little creak and whisper felt like it was happening right in the room with me. It had this way of pulling you in, making you forget that it was just a game. I had my headset on, volume turned up to really get immersed. I had turned off most of the lights in my room to add to the atmosphere. It was probably around midnight, and I was so into the game that I didn't notice how late it had gotten. The house was dead silent, except for the sounds coming from the game. which made everything feel even more eerie. The game was ramping up with these intense jump scares, and even though I was expecting them, they still got me every time. So there I was, navigating through this dark corridor in the game, when I heard this sound. At first I thought it was coming from the game. It was this faint, high-pitched whine, but then it started getting louder, and I realized it wasn't coming from the game at all. I paused the game and took off my headset, just listening. The sound kept going. It was like this low hum mixed with a static noise, coming from somewhere behind me. I turned around in my chair, half expecting to see something, but my room was empty. The sound was still there though, and it seemed to be coming from the corner of the room where I had my router and modem set up. I got up and walked over to the corner, trying to figure out what was going on. The router lights were blinking like normal, nothing out of the ordinary there. I thought maybe it was some kind of interference or feedback from the speakers, so I unplugged the router to see if it would stop. The noise died down a bit, but then it changed, like it was moving or shifting around. I stood there for a second, listening, and the hairs on the back of my neck started to rise. I couldn't quite place where the sound was coming from, but it felt like it was moving, almost like it was circling around me. I took a step back, feeling this sudden urge to get out of the room, but then it just stopped, just like that. Dead silence. I stood there for a moment, heart racing, trying to process what just happened. I took a deep breath, telling myself it was probably just my mind playing tricks on me. Maybe I was just too into the game, you know? These horror games can mess with your head sometimes. I shrugged it off, plugged the router back in, and went back to my chair, trying to shake off the weird feeling. I put my headset back on, ready to dive back into the game, but as soon as I unpaused it, the screen flickered. Like, not just a quick glitch, it flickered and then went black. I stared at it, confused, tapping the keys and moving the mouse, but nothing was happening. I thought maybe my graphics card had overheated or something, but then the screen turned back on and the game was running fine. Only something was different. The character in the game was standing in the exact same room as my gaming setup. Like, they had somehow glitched into a room that looked just like mine, down to the smallest detail. My desk, my monitors, even the same posters on the wall. It was like the game had mirrored my room perfectly. I felt this chill run down my spine because there was no way this was supposed to happen. The game wasn't set in a place like this at all. I moved the character around, trying to make sense of it. They walked up to the desk in the game, and I swear it looked exactly like my desk. The character then turned towards the door in the game, which was now slightly ajar. My actual door was closed, but it felt like if I looked away and then back at it, it would be open just a crack. I couldn't shake the feeling that somehow the game was showing me what was going to happen next. I got this intense feeling of dread, like something bad was about to happen. I hesitated, not sure if I should keep playing or just shut the whole thing down and call it a night. But you know how curiosity gets the better of you, right? So I kept going. I made the character move towards the door, which creaked open as they approached. It opened into a dark hallway, just like the one outside my room. As I moved the character forward, the game started making this strange noise. It was like a low rumble mixed with that same high-pitched whine I'd heard earlier. The screen started to flicker again, and I thought the game was about to crash, but it didn't. Instead, the hallway in the game seemed to stretch out, getting longer and darker with each step the character took. I felt my heart pounding in my chest. The atmosphere was so thick you could almost touch it. I was so focused on the game that I didn't notice at first, but the room around me started to feel colder, like someone had left a window open in the middle of winter. I glanced around, half expecting to see something lurking in the shadows, but there was nothing. I turned my attention back to the game, and the character had reached the end of the hallway. There was a door there, slightly open, with just a sliver of light coming through. I pushed it open, and the screen went black again. I sat there, staring at the monitor, waiting for something to happen. And then the sound started. It wasn't coming from the game this time. It was coming from outside my room. This slow, deliberate knocking, like someone was at the door. I froze, my mind racing. It was late, too late for anyone to be at the door. I took off my headset and listened. The knocking came again, 3 slow knocks, each one louder than the last. I got up, every muscle in my body tense. I moved towards the door, feeling like I was in one of those horror movies where the protagonist makes the worst possible decision. but I had to know what it was. I had to see if it was just some weird coincidence or if something was really out there. I opened the door to my room slowly, peering out into the hallway. It was dark, the kind of darkness that seems to swallow up everything. I didn't see anyone, but the knocking continued, echoing through the hallway. I stepped out, my heart racing, and made my way towards the front door. As I got closer, I could see the silhouette of someone standing outside, just barely visible through the frosted glass. My mind was screaming at me to turn back, to lock myself in my room and wait it out. But I was already too close, too curious to stop now. I reached for the doorknob, my hand trembling. I turned it slowly, opening the door just a crack, and then it stopped. The knocking, the silhouette, it was gone. I opened the door wider, looking out into the night, but there was no one there, just the empty street, quiet and still. I stood there for a moment, trying to make sense of it all. Maybe it was just some prank, some kids messing around, but something about it felt off, felt wrong. I closed the door, locking it tight, and went back to my room, but the uneasy feeling stayed with me. I sat back down at my desk, staring at the monitor. The game was still running, the characters standing in the dark hallway. I hesitated for a moment, then moved them forward. They walked through the darkness until they came to another door. I opened it, and the screen went black again. But this time, there was a message. Just a single line of text that sent chills down my spine. "Behind you." I whipped around in my chair, heart pounding, but there was nothing there. Just my room, empty and silent. I turned back to the monitor, and the game had returned to the main menu. I sat there, staring at the screen, trying to calm my racing heart. I didn't sleep that night. I kept expecting to hear the knocking again, or to see that silhouette outside my window. But nothing happened. The house was quiet, almost too quiet, like it was holding its breath, waiting for something. The next day, I tried to go back to my usual routine, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every time I sat down at my desk, I felt this prickling sensation at the back of my neck, like eyes boring into me. I even checked all the security cameras around the house, but there was nothing out of the ordinary, just empty rooms and hallways. I stopped playing horror games for a while after that. I couldn't bring myself to put on the headset again, to immerse myself in that world. Every time I thought about it, I would hear those knocks echoing in my mind. Even now, when I play games late into the night, I find myself answering at the door, waiting for the knock that I know is coming. Because it wasn't just a game. Something was here that night, something that shouldn't have been. And even though I haven't heard the knocking since, I can't shake the feeling that it's not over. That whatever it was, it's still out there, watching, waiting for the right moment to knock again. Alright, so this happened a few months ago, and I still get chills just thinking about it. I had just gotten my hands on this brand new gaming setup, finally upgraded my PC, and got a fancy chair. Basically the whole gamer dream. My weekends were usually dedicated to marathon gaming sessions, with a bunch of snacks and a whole lot of energy drinks to keep me going through the night. So, this one Friday, I was planning to dive into a new game that everyone was raving about. It was one of those survival horror games where you're constantly on edge, trying to avoid monsters or whatever, but it was supposed to be super immersive. I figured, why not? Might as well see what the hype is all about. I started playing around 8 p.m., the perfect time to get fully into the vibe. The lights were dimmed, headphones on, and the sound turned all the way up to catch every little detail. The game was intense right from the start. Dark corridors, creepy noises, the whole deal. I was completely absorbed. Hours went by, and I was just lost in this world, jumping at every little scare the game threw at me. It was probably around 1 a.m. when I first noticed something weird. I was in the middle of a particularly tense scene, sneaking around in the game to avoid some creature, when I heard this faint sound. At first I thought it was part of the game, some ambient noise to freak you out even more. But it wasn't coming from the game. It was coming from somewhere in my apartment. It sounded like a faint scratching noise, almost like nails on a chalkboard but softer. I paused the game, took off my headphones, and listened. Nothing. Just silence. I shook it off, thinking maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me after being so deep into the game for hours. I put my headphones back on and tried to get back into it, but now I was on edge, my senses heightened. Every noise in the game made me jump, and I kept glancing over my shoulder, feeling like there was something behind me. After a while, I managed to get back into the flow, telling myself to just focus on the screen and ignore everything else. But then, about half an hour later, I heard it again. This time, it was clearer, louder, a definite scratching noise coming from the direction of my bedroom door. My heart started pounding. I paused the game again and just sat there, staring at the door, trying to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe it was the neighbors or something outside, but it didn't stop. It was this slow, deliberate scratching sound, like someone or something was on the other side of the door trying to get in. I got up from my chair, moving as quietly as I could, and crept towards the door. My hand was shaking a bit as I reached for the doorknob. I hesitated, then swung the door open. Nothing. The hallway was empty. I flicked on the lights and looked around. No one there. I checked the other rooms in my apartment, even the closets, under the bed. Nothing. I was starting to feel a bit paranoid, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I went back to my setup, sat down, and took a deep breath. Maybe I was just getting too into the game, letting it mess with my head. But still, that noise had been so real. I tried to shake it off, put my headphones back on, and kept playing. About an hour later, it happened again. This time, it wasn't a scratching noise. It was a knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks, coming from the other side of my bedroom wall. I froze, my hands hovering over the keyboard. My heart was racing, and my mind was scrambling to find a rational explanation. I live in an apartment building, so maybe it was the neighbors, right? But at this hour, and it sounded so close, like it was coming from inside the wall itself. I paused the game again and just sat there, staring at the wall, listening. Then, another knock. 3 more, just as slow and deliberate. I could feel my skin crawling. This wasn't normal. I took off my headphones and just sat there, listening. The knocking stopped, and everything was silent again. I didn't dare move for what felt like forever, just waiting for something else to happen. But nothing did. I was starting to feel genuinely freaked out. I considered calling someone, maybe even the building security. But what was I going to say? That I heard some knocks and scratching noises? They'd think I was nuts. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself down. I was probably just tired, letting my imagination run wild after playing a horror game for hours. That had to be it. I tried to get back into the game, but it was no use. I was too freaked out. Every little noise made me jump, and I kept glancing around, expecting something to happen. I decided to call it a night, shut down my computer, and went to bed. I left the lights on, though. I know, sounds childish, but I couldn't stand the idea of being in the dark. I lay there for what felt like hours, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence. Just when I was starting to drift off, I heard it again, the scratching noise coming from somewhere in the room. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding in my chest. The scratching was getting louder, more insistent. It was coming from my closet. I stared at the closet door, which was slightly ajar. I couldn't see anything inside, just darkness. The scratching kept going, this horrible, grating sound that made my skin crawl. I don't know what came over me, but I had to see what it was. I got out of bed, walked over to the closet, and yanked the door open. Nothing. Just my clothes hanging there, shoes on the floor, a couple of boxes. The scratching had stopped. I stood there, my heart racing, staring into the closet, half expecting something to jump out at me. But there was nothing. I backed away, closed the closet door, and went back to bed, trying to convince myself it was just my mind playing tricks on me. But I couldn't sleep. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, waiting for something to happen. Eventually, I must have dozed off, because the next thing I knew, it was morning. The sun was shining through the window, and everything seemed normal. I got up, walked around the apartment, checked every room, but there was nothing out of place. No signs of anything or anyone. I tried to forget about it, went about my day, but it was always in the back of my mind. That scratching noise, those knocks. I couldn't explain it, but I couldn't forget it either. A few days later, I was talking to a friend about it, just casually mentioning that I'd had a weird experience while gaming. I didn't go into detail, just said that I heard some noises that freaked me out. They asked what game I was playing, and when I told them, their face went pale. They said they'd heard about something similar happening to another player. This person was playing the same game, heard strange noises, felt like they were being watched. But it turned out to be a hoax, some prank the developers had programmed into the game as an Easter egg or something. Supposedly, it was just part of the game's code, designed to freak players out. That explanation made sense, but it didn't make me feel any better. The thing is, even if it was just a trick, just some programming designed to scare me, it still felt real. Too real. And it got under my skin in a way that no game ever had before. I haven't played that game since. It's just sitting there in my library, gathering digital dust. Sometimes when I'm playing other games, I'll hear a noise, a creak, a knock, something faint, and my mind will go back to that night. I'll feel my heart skip a beat, and for a split second, I'm right back there, in the dark, staring at that closet door. Maybe it was all in my head. Maybe it was just a really well-designed game that got the better of me. But part of me can't shake the feeling that there was something more to it, something that wasn't supposed to be there, something that was trying to get my attention. And that's what keeps me up at night sometimes. Not the game itself, but the thought that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't all a trick.